focus. This you'll need if you are starting your career focus. If you are in high school or in college, come and hear the skills, the roles and goals you need to know to keep yourself focused. Best believe it, you gon' need it. Career focus. Career focus.
Hello everyone and welcome to a new exciting episode. Our first episode for 2024. Today I have interview with Nikolaos. He's a lead data scientist at HSBC. And today with him I'll be discussing his career journey, his education, what made him go into data science. Hi Nikolaos.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for taking the time. So, Nikolaos, can you briefly tell us about yourself?
I'm from Greece. I studied in my bachelor up to my bachelor's in Greece. I studied in physics. Really loved physics, math. I thought that physics has a little bit more to offer, like it's a superset, let's say, of math. So that's why I chose physics specifically. I thought that at the time, my guess was that I never wanted to have like a career within, like pursue PhD or something, like to become like some sort of like teaching or anything like in the university. It was more like about a safe option as I consider at the time that gives me plenty of options later, if that makes sense. So I did do a lot of teaching though, after finished my degree, math and private lessons like a tutor, like for physics and math, and a bit of chemistry. Later on, I decided I would like to pursue further studies in slightly different subject, in electronics engineering and business management, which was a subject in Leeds University. I came here in UK, and of course after that, like I joined the workforce in UK. I would say started with a startup and then entered into the financial sector.
Amazing. And obviously, once you finish your education, you had to start looking for a job or a profession. Did you find it easy or a difficult process? And how did you find the whole, obviously, because there's a difference in how the UK operates in terms of a job market compared to other places in Europe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So I think to tie up together the whole things I mentioned in the first question, I think like during my studies, of course, in physics, like I was also teaching like high school students on the subject. Later I finished and I went into insurance, worked a little bit in insurance in Greece before I moved for my master's. I think insurance was easy to get at the time because it wasn't something that I really, wanted per se, like to have a career there. It was more like I had some relatives I know that had their office, and it just, I started as an intern, and like just moved into the field a little bit. I never saw that myself, like growing in the sector. Hence, I was always thinking like to get it where I really wanted, which is more like on an analytics, like programming. I really love these subjects from school, programming and analytics, math, being like having this problem solving capacity at my workplace. That's what would give me, I think at the time, I felt like pursuing further studies and a master's in UK would be like a gateway to get into the job market here. Which eventually happened, yeah. And then that's I would say was quite tough after my master's to find exactly what I wanted, because I wanted to go towards finance. I know it might sound boring, but after like going into like physics and having and electronics engineering and a little bit of computer science, all of these things, like then going into finance sounds a little bit boring, but I think I always had this idea, like, and specifically in the investing sector, like I find it very fast-pacing industry, It's quite technology driven. I tried to get into this sector immediately after studies, but I think it was quite difficult to land. I was not very familiar with the internship, how it works here in UK. So it was very difficult to find immediately, specifically a role in the field. But I'm quite glad how it evolved. Like I got into a startup outside of finance, and that's where I learned most of my skills. Like because you may know, it's a very fast-paced environment. You're allowed to do much. You have much more flexibility of what you can install in your machine, and people who have worked for probably I highly or not this easily. I encourage highly people to have a pass through their career through a startup. It's completely different to a big organization, and that's where I upskilled very fast in programming, software development, data science as well. I get to know data science more there. It was quite interesting.
Fascinating. And did you like the data science aspect because it's very practical? Basically, you're trying to solve business problems in a pragmatic way. Is that what you're attracted to becoming a data scientist?
Yeah. So again, coming from in my last years in a bachelor's in Greece, for instance, physics department, specifically in Athens, that I studied. Our degrees tends to be like 4 years, and the last year is kind of a half a master, like kind of a specialization. And I was quite fortunate at the time that I was a very newly department that started within the physics department, which was about computer science and electronics. And of course, I was very excited. I joined into that, and that's where I came for the first time across the idea of neural networks, machine learning. And I decided, I'll do a small, junior thesis for my bachelor's on this topic. And that's how I got to understand more about data science. That was the very, very first introduction to me. Of course, the job market and the industry and the technology was not it's very early days in Greece. Of course, it would not, even here, I would say there was not too much you could hear at that time, 10 or so years ago. But yeah, that was my first engagement with data science, and I really kind of fell in love with the subject. I really like the hardware aspect as well, that you utilize the most of the hardware. Really love being one of my hobbies was actually gaming, which I can talk later. But that's how I felt, like the idea of utilizing a GPU to do much more than gaming. Funnily enough, it was something that really got my attention at the time.
Very, very, very interesting. And can you tell us a little bit about what your day-to-day work life looks like? Are there any particular challenges you face, or it depends on the specific project and how you best tackle them?
So typically, like again, like in my current role, I would say like the typical day, of course, going in the office would be like catching up your emails and some BAU activities. Of course, then you have as part of that is probably like a lot of meetings that you tend to have like in the mornings, and of course you would do some kind of presenting, maybe some kind of findings, some proof of concept that you worked before, or some research that you work with some colleagues, or maybe new projects that would come. Like all of this, I guess, like comes mostly in the mornings, but then I will always leave some time for myself, like to read or research on, or do some sort of training, at least on a topic. Ideally, I always like, of course, it's one skill set is the data science, but then again, it's domain knowledge, and it's how you bring all these things together. So that's currently what I'm focusing more on, developing my domain knowledge and having the background in data science. That's where I believe I would be able to see opportunity to apply things, if that makes sense. And of course, later in the day, it's always my favorite time to get coffee and have coding, uninterrupted, hands-on work. Let's say that the most of the application I can do, like it would be, would be like through the. Of course, from time to time you would have like some silent days where you can do more work, actually more coding, more fun stuff. But yeah, like most of the typical days I included fortunately or unfortunately, emails, BAU, and meetings.
Is the main language that you normally use on a day-to-day basis Python or something else?
Yeah, so we use in my current role, we use primarily Python, 100%. So yeah, it's a blend between pure Python, also like using notebooks to visualize internally within the data science team or to external stakeholders. I think everyone started to get used a little bit to a notebook nowadays. But yeah, Python is the main tool of choice. There are other teams for various reasons that they like R. They're more into R in the wider group. Personally speaking, I feel like there's no we shouldn't be distinct between like both are tools that you can use. Like you can get the best out of like there are some packages that are better in one. There are some better in the other. I think it's just like two tools that you can have in your arsenal, and there's no reason to be strongly in favor of one and hating the other. Which sometimes you see this happening.
No, it's true. I mean, any programming language is just a tool. It depends on your task at hand and how best to tackle the task. And naturally, people have preferences for a particular set of tool, but that doesn't mean necessarily that you can't utilize multiple set of tools to solve a business problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what are the major challenges in your line of work? Like, do you face sometimes difficulty convincing people that a certain approach is the right one, or certain, let's say, something that you're trying to create that could actually bring a value add to the business? Do you find that difficult or easy to accomplish?
Yeah, so very interesting. I think new things are always challenging, and data science. I'm not going to call it like the field of data science, deep learning, machine learning, AI generally. It's not. Someone could argue like it's not new, but the way you would implement, and specifically in some sectors like finance, which tends to be like more traditional, very heavy regulated, and a lot of compliance, security at its peak, I would say. It is challenging. It's still a new thing to those sectors, and one step at a time. You need to if you make the wrong step, you have a lot of repercussions. Whereas, like, as I would like to say to people when they ask my opinion about this subject, I would say, like, if you're in a marketing company, as long as you have the data set that you have acquired legally, there is no other reason why you cannot do your best to, implement, let's say, the best model possible. You don't have to address why it works. As long as it works and it's performing well, that's fine. But in finance, it's not always like this. You would need to have regulatory requirements met. Even if it is the most performing, you might not go for that because you can't explain why. And we know that this is a big problem in, especially with Gen AI and deep learning. There are new methods, but explaining why the decision was made, it's something that is very essential, I would say. So yeah, it's coming back to the original question. I'd say I try to explain in a very based on the audience and the familiarity with the subject and their expertise. I would try to curate my message. I always try to be very, very simple in explaining things. I think that's when you gain their trust, and they're more willing to actually, open the doors for a potential project and an application into data science. And of course, I always like when coding or having a problem, reverse engineering, reverse thinking is always quite important. I try to reverse thinking, like what issues might arise before they arise. And I think that, again, if something that you have thought beforehand, and you go to a stakeholder, to a client, that's when they see that you have taken care of this before they even arrive. That's again when you get the gain their trust. It's definitely a challenging topic, like gaining trust and dealing with challenging clients, specifically in the data science context. I think it's definitely an interesting topic.
No, exactly, because like you mentioned correctly, data science is still being defined by the technology used, but also by the business cases people utilize it for. It's still very much developing field. And obviously that brings it to a host of other challenges and opportunities. And obviously you obviously mentioned that you have to convince people, which is very important because obviously these are very complicated tools and everybody needs to be on board what they can accomplish and what they can't do, because they can't solve, let's say, if you have data architecture legacy issues, they can't solve that. Then you need data architects, data engineers, you need a new framework. What they can do is improve certain processes that are currently running and streamline how data is being analyzed, which is quite powerful, because then if you want to make a quick business decision, you still need the data. And if this helps you provide the data in a more holistic manner, that's very important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think like that reminded me, of course, on the one hand, and as you gain more experience and you see people, and potentially you get the opportunity to manage people. Like, it's about managing again expectations. Young people would always want to do a lot of the very funny, not funny, sexy, I would say, if I'm allowed, stuff in data science, like the modeling. That's what they want. And you, to be realistic here, and especially within finance and asset management in particular, where I am, is difficult to have every day that use case that you will do again and again. Model.fit. And when that doesn't happen, and you have promised to young people like that they start their career in an exciting thing like data science, they come out of university. Myself, I've never been. I'm not sure if I would have been to a data science degree, but now there are so many, and they have certain expectations. And if they join a role and they see all these bottlenecks, as you mentioned, from legacy infrastructure, and they always need to take a step back, they might get discouraged quite a lot, and oftentimes they leave for. I mean, I've seen in my team, like, people leaving for tech companies after that, because simply they provide this agility, and they would do much more in data science than here. And on the other hand side, I think, in my opinion, it's always the holy trinity, I would say. It's like the skill set, it's the tools, like the infrastructure, and then it's the data itself. And you cannot do with either of these three. And more often than not, the people, like, they would budget for data science, like, okay, we want to do an AI, machine learning AI. Let's do something because we're going to fall behind. That's I guess the idea that the management would have. But then they allocate the budget, and all of these three people, like the skill sets, like hiring the people, and then the tools, of course, so that they can work, and then of course the data. Especially if you're not a company that acquires data, like a tech, like Google, Microsoft, that you basically capture data, and you sell data. That's your core business model. If you're not into this business, data is not cheap. And if you don't have the data, you can't do data science. It's funny that, I guess, like, it's intuitive, and people, but more often than not, they miss this because when the bill hits, that's where data science doesn't work. For some companies, they might think like, okay, it's too much to hire people. It's too much for the tool set. Okay, we did this too, but now we have to pay this massive bill for acquiring data sets. And then, suddenly, all of a sudden, data science doesn't work for them.
No, that's very true. I mean, like you correctly mentioned, without that, you don't have data science. And everything costs money. So you always need to have a set budget. But I think in finance, this is still developing in terms of the mentality, how to operate in a correct manner. And I think it's going to take some time.
Absolutely. Yeah. This takes time, and it's probably this generation of the first managers that they would become more senior. They started when, like, the very first, let's say, people who got into data science as it got involved, but they will reach, I guess, that level of seniority that they will take this decision. They will be able to know that this is what you need to factor in from the beginning. And of course, in the wider industry, what I've seen from friends, and even colleagues, that there are much more data engineering roles are opening than data science right now, and much more demand, which I feel it validates with, if I may say so, before, it validates the fact that you need to lay the infrastructure. Companies understood that, okay, if the skill set is good, but if we don't have the data, if we don't have the infrastructure, if we don't prepare our house, it's not gonna, we're not gonna work. It's not gonna work. So that's why you see a lot of data engineering roles now popping up, and a lot of focus there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real focus, and hopefully things will improve in the coming years. Given that, do you see, obviously, because in the more technical field, do you see a major impact in terms of how technology is evolving currently and how potentially it could influence your current processes? Obviously, people keep talking about ChatGPT, Gemini from Google, and a few other tools that are coming to the market. How do you feel about them, and how do you see them changing the way you normally work?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. I have a lot of contradicting thoughts in my mind. On the one side, I'd like to be the person who, of course, tries a lot, and of course, I'm considering myself a data scientist, and I need to test a lot of those tools. But I always like to take a step back, almost, and just, if you don't own certain processes, if you don't know how it works, especially in finance, maybe that's the context I wanted to give again. It's very difficult to trust and implement that solution, be it ChatGPT or more advanced AI solutions. So in that regard, I think I always, again, like to see internal efforts rather than companies that they try to rely to external a lot of consulting, because in the end of the day, if you don't develop internally the expertise, it's going to get cut off once the budget is not enough to continue having their quite fairly expensive consultants, let's say, or outsource to the company, like the work that you were meant to have the knowledge built inside. So that I think technology is very important. It gets evolved always. And thinking again of what we said, skills, tools, and data. If you have to do in-house a lot of things. Of course, you can't reinvent the wheel always. You have to make the right choices. But yeah, I think that's where the difference comes in play, and you become successful or not, depending on the right decisions on having something internally, the knowledge, maintain the knowledge internally rather than always outsource. Otherwise, I feel it's a very important. AI is a very important concept right now that you need to, if you want to be on this game, you need to develop internally um, um, internally the knowledge. Yeah. Now I can share a story like about my partner who's like on a different field. And she's in finance. She's a lawyer though. And she thinks that with Microsoft Copilot, I'm sure you probably know yourself or you've seen advertised. She thinks that a lot of the job is going to be taken away from her, which again I might be naive for the time being. I call myself maybe or Luddite. I'd like to think that I'm not, but yeah, I think it's quite far away from being able to do 100% what humans do, and to the extent that you don't rely on your job being done on Copilot yourself, then you're always useful. Yeah, but it's very evolving. Technology is evolving really fast, and you really always need to adapt as a company.
No, I mean, I completely agree. And obviously, with any new technology, it would take time for us to see a real impact. I see a lot of changes in terms of potentially how people would at least prototype their scripts before they deploy it. Maybe especially if you're a novice, you're starting out of uni, like we discussed in the beginning of the interview, you'll be much more in tune of, for example, prototyping tools or processes, which companies would utilize immediately. I think that will be quite powerful, because even now, before you actually put something into production, it takes so much effort from so many people to sign off. But with this tool, potentially you can actually develop something bit by bit, and then it will allow you for full implementation quite quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And then like one thing to add, if you think that in the past that you would have like your own solution, like an on-prem server or something, and then all the clouds started appearing one by one, and we thought that this is a very scalable solution that I can work in the future. But then all the clouds started like going a little bit different, more or less. They have the same kind of features, but like they are slightly different. And if you don't make the right decision, you might, like for instance, now Gen AI comes in different flavors on every cloud. It was a huge infrastructure challenge to be on the cloud, especially within a financial institution. And after that, now comes the Gen AI. That's another infrastructure challenge, I guess. So it's very interesting. It's very I don't envy the people on the IT and security within a bank. Like they really have a tough time, like on catching up with these developments. So yeah, it's really challenging, I think, infrastructure wise.
Now let's jump a bit about you. I don't know about you. So can you tell us a bit about your hobbies? What do you like to do in your spare time?
Yeah, sure. I've always liked exercising. So I've as far as I remember myself, like from very early until after my bachelor's, I was training for 200 and 400 meters and long distances sometimes. But yeah, it was a big part of my life. And I like football, of course, playing, and a lot of gaming, which I stopped. I think I don't have that much time anymore. But it was, as I said earlier, one of the main reasons that took my attention, like to get into data science, purely because I always had like a really good GPU in my system, let's say, in my personal computer. Always liked, again, another hobby, like making computers for me and personal computers for friends and myself. And yeah, so the GPU was having a way to leverage more your GPU was the best thing that got me into data science. Yeah. But yeah, nowadays, like, of course, going to work, I have quite a lot of time in the train. I always would read a book or listen to an audiobook. Yeah, I guess it's the only way to catch up with the developments.
So do you have a favorite book, or have read something interesting recently?
Yeah, I would say most of the O'Reilly, probably people, if you go on Amazon and you just Google for data science books, like you get a lot of O'Reilly. They have like finance specific or non-finance, like just yeah, exactly. Python for finance. Yeah. Yeah, so I have that one as well, like in PDF as well. Have my iPad together. I would look examples in the train sometimes just to refresh back. Another one which was it is I think it's from it's called ML, machine learning for trading, from Stephen Johnson. I really like that one. It's very, very heavy, like very big, but even outside of trading, like it's not trading. I feel consider very specific. It's really, yeah, it's really great. Yeah, you have a lot of examples to pick from that book, right?
Yeah,
You probably
I
have
have the
all
other
of
one.
them yourself.
I have the other one. I have the one by Marcos Lopez de Prado, Advances in
Hmm.
Financial Machine Learning, which is very similar to the one you mentioned. I think obviously machine learning is a very expensive field, and I think these books are very useful because they have very practical implementations instead of theoretical, and this is what I particularly like
Exactly,
about
yeah.
them.
Absolutely, yeah, and same here. And it's you can find, like with O'Reilly, you can find a lot of beginner ones. And I think, thinking of myself, like in the beginning, as I said, there was no data science masters like nowadays that you can have like a lot. And it was the only way, like you scrap through the internet. I think the very early days of um, like a Stack Overflow equivalent. Not remember how it was called. It crossed my mind. It slipped from my mind now. But yeah, you had like this web. Like I had like a huge folder of links that they were explaining about PCA and things like that, and I would go through them, and then of course, oh, this book, I should buy that book, and oh, it has, it was like a search kind for knowledge. There was nothing that was in one place, and then as the industry got more mature and the books got more mature, like you had these kind of books like the ones you mentioned that they have almost everything that you wanted, and you have it as a kind of a thing that's why I like to have them in electronic format, because I can grab code from there as well for my personal or work projects. So yeah, it's really, really good. And yeah, I have quite a few that I really always revisit. Outside of more technical, I would say, like I really like one of my favorites is like Sanchu's The Art of War. I think there's a lot of analogies for, it's like you can apply his logic everywhere, like, and especially in businesses. I really tend to feel like it's a war, it's a battle. Maybe because I like strategy games as well. And yeah, I think that's really an enjoyable book. A lot of good lines from that.
Yes, exactly. It has a lot of practical advice in real life, and I also really like that book as well. So,
Mhm.
where do you see yourself in the next 10 years?
Ooh, that feels like a job interview question. Yeah, no. Well, so I'd like to see myself. I always think of myself like being quite hands-on. I just can't feel can stand the thought that I will have an Excel spreadsheet and I would not be able to code and do things. I get so frustrated sometimes when simple things I can do with pandas, for instance, I can't do with Excel. But now they're integrating Python. I haven't tried yet. But yeah, it's I always would like to see myself being hands-on. And I'd like to get more knowledge in the field of investing and asset management. This is the domain I would like to be more like into my career, and getting more responsibility and potentially in the future progress like in my career in the field. To that extent, I also went for pursuing the CFA because I had no background, as mentioned before, like in finance. So I thought that would be a good challenge to get myself into investing, get to know more about asset management. But yeah, that's I would like to grow in this field, and of course, knowing what I know on the data science, whenever the opportunity is there to apply something, I would not hesitate definitely to do that. So I think that's how I would like to see myself the next 10 years.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of dedication and effort, but I think with your tenacity, you'll succeed definitely. And for my final question, if you could go back in time when you were 18, what advice would you give to your younger self?
I don't know if it was luck or, well, I think I mentioned in the beginning that physics was something that I thought it will keep a lot of doors open for me later. So I think I would definitely not change that. I felt like that was really a good background on doing really anything, and then you can pivot on anything after that. So if I could give an advice, because sometimes I can't move on if something if a concept I don't understand it deeply, and I think that with only that much time that we have, you can't always understand everything to the very last detail, how it really works behind the scenes, like all the math, let's say. So I would give an advice to myself, like, it's okay not to understand everything. Maybe sometimes high level is better than getting into the finer details. Otherwise, you pursue the career of specializing in one thing and being like a professor, I guess, in the topic. That's how I see.
I think that's a very good advice, especially because sometimes you need to see things from a bigger perspective, because sometimes, especially with big organizations, you feel like a small cog in a big machine. But then sometimes if you take a more holistic view, you can easily see what the direction the company is taking, where you want to take direction as well in your career. I think that's very important.
Absolutely, yeah. We so much specialization and so much going on right now, and it will keep growing more, I guess, every field. It's very easy to get lost. Yeah, and maybe one other thing I would have possibly pushed more towards internship. I think it's a really good way of getting to know if you like what you think you like, basically, if that makes sense. So trying in the beginning, and it's okay if you don't like it. At least you know that you don't like it, and you move to the next one. I think I would have done something. Not that it happened that I didn't like something, but I would have felt, if someone feels like this, I think internships are really great place to try things.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, at least in internship, you can see at least what you like, what you don't like, but you also learn very valuable skills in terms of how to behave in a business setting and how basically to present ideas. I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on this, I would like to thank Nikolaos for taking the time to participate in Influential Futures Career Focus podcast. I think his expertise and knowledge, as well as the fact that he shared his experience hands-on, is going to be quite helpful. Thank you, Nikolaos, for taking the time.
Thank you very much for having me again. It was very interesting. Hope people enjoy this.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you to our listeners. See you in the next episode. Thank you.